like we did, and maybe had a different perspective, and those people actually exist. And we've got them all here today on stage, and I'm going to begin by introducing one of our special treats and guests, and he will also be hosting the lunch, which I highly recommend for those of you who haven't had a chance to sign up. I think there's 3 more seats left at the lunch following this, and it's with Henry Cheung of IDEO. Brief overview of Henry. Lately, he's been jamming with like-minded colleagues in his role as practice lead at IDEO throughout the world, really. And as those of you may or may not know, IDEO is a phenomenal think tank and do tank that focuses on human-centered design, which is kind of what today's all about, so it's great because it all worked out. He grew up in Hong Kong, then moved to Toronto, where he's been in search of pedestrian life and walking all around the world, essentially. His favorite street is Queen Street, Toronto, circa 2000, which is very important to note because things have changed since then, and kind of the true grit of what the street was is no longer. He's a connoisseur of conversation in its most raw and natural and evolving form. He's a designer by practice and adventurer at heart. His future goal or passion as part of what he does with IDEO and then just in life is to kind of make sure that the art of conversation is alive and well. He wants to help people develop a more peripheral view and begin to have conversations where they're questioning and inspiring that true curiosity that kind of is what helps us produce our best and have the most fun doing it. So with that, I turn it over to Henry.
Hi everyone. I'm actually going to try to bring Yolanda to every talk that I give now because she makes me sound so much smarter than I actually am. So thank you everyone for coming. I think we're just going to do a quick round introduction of all of us. And we're going to do this in an unconventional way from Yolanda's suggestion. So I'm going to introduce you to Heather Rosenberg. So her favorite street is actually in Barcelona, the Paseo de Gracia. Right? Say right. And the reason why she loves that street is because it's very, very human scale. It has a really nice proportion in terms of the shop fronts and having residential on top of the shops. She also really loves Gaudi buildings. I also do love Gaudi buildings. I think he's the Frank Gehry of their time. And she grew up in LA, and one of her ambition is to bring public transit to, let me rephrase. I'm going to go through my notes. See, like I'm unconventional in the sense that these are all my notes. So she's a principal at CTG. Right? I got it right. Okay. So, and she's actually an ecologist by training, and she's a principal of their sustainable practice. And the little story that I heard this morning that was very interesting was that she was hoping to come here by train, and it takes usually an hour to come here by train. But the train doesn't come so early, and it doesn't come right on campus, so she had to drive. And it took her 2 hours to get here. And she was saying that apologetically. And I thought that was actually a really beautiful story to tell in light of this particular panel. So on that note, I'll pass that on to Heather.
So I'll introduce... Is this on? Yeah. Cool. I feel like a diva. It's fun. Thank you. That's Martin Schwartz over there. Martin is a principal and partner of RSM Design. He's the the X of RSM, which is an international architectural branding studio. He's also the publisher of Archetype Media. And he was born in Dallas, Texas, and received his degree in architecture and business from the University of Texas in Austin and the Virginia Polytech Institute in Switzerland, which is pretty cool. He currently lives in San Clemente, so he's local. He did have to drive 2 hours this morning, which is lucky. His favorite street is Rue Claire in Paris, he said, because it's beautiful, mixed use with residential above and commercial below. and all the commercials really mom and pop kind of shops, and that they're really open to the street, and that street is really active and completely different during the day versus at night, and really vibrant place. And his goal is to integrate innovative design into sustainable with sustainable practices. And that's really the premise of his magazine, is to look at great design that is sustainable and meld those two terms.
Yeah, I'll go next for Matthew Blackett. And great to meet you, by the way. We've had a couple conversations on the phone, and I've really enjoyed talking with you. He's currently a publisher and creative director of Spacing Magazine, which is an amazing magazine that does talk about pedestrian-friendly environments and walkable environments, and really does a more in-depth research about how to create these places for people to really connect to these environments. He was born in Toronto, graduated in journalism in Humber College, is that correct? Okay, in Toronto and Carleton University. His favorite street is Strogard Street in Copenhagen, and he talks about this. It wasn't originally. Actually, can you talk a little bit about that street too?
It's one of they have a series of pedestrian malls in Copenhagen, and it used to kind of come out into an area that's now a plaza, but for about 30 years, from the 30s into the 60s, it was a parking lot. It was this medieval square that was a parking lot, and then at some point the city of Copenhagen and some of its architects and planners decided that we should reclaim this wonderful space from cars parking and turn it into a pedestrian mall. And over 30 years, they've built about 10 or 15 pedestrian malls in that city.
Brilliant. Yeah, beautiful.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, beautiful. That's right. Yeah, that's something to talk about here. And then I think the last thing is your passion for the next 10 years and where you see your profession is all about thinking of complete streets and how to integrate this pedestrian into walkable environments. And a very worthy cause, I must say. That's really what it's all about.
I don't have to introduce anyone, so.
And so as you see, the point of having each of these and why they were hand-selected is Henry being, world-class facilitator of conversation, thoughts, ideas, and creativity. We thought it'd be fun to bring him in and really just have everybody sit and listen to dialogue between all of them. Matt represents, more of the people's side of things. As a person and practicer of journalism, he's an observer, and aside from just observing, he's got to figure out how to translate that into a periodical that, gets published regularly. Heather on the other side is the metric side, so for those of you that are a little bit more linear thinking, she's going to try and add some sense to the craziness that they kind of spout out over the next hour. Then we have Martin, who talks about translating those messages into something physical so that these places become legible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Henry.
I really haven't paid her for this comment. So I think one of the, first of all, I think personally I felt that both reports were actually quite compelling in how comprehensive and holistic they are in terms of understanding the respective cities. And I think there are, right after the two presentations, the four of us got together really just to kind of talk about what were some of the kind of key thoughts that resonated with us, or gaps that we saw that could actually improve the conversation. So I think one of the things that really struck me, Heather, was your take on nature and on ecology, and how that can be a really, really kind of beautiful and contributing factor to improving these two cities. So do you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, sure. It was interesting just looking at the aerial photos of these two sites. The first thing that really struck me is they're so hard. And we really, the challenges that these two projects are facing, this is one of the things we were really talking about, is these are really difficult projects. They're difficult areas, and part of that is because they've been built out in a very particular way that's not flexible. And so it's really dealing with the legacy of this type of development. So you know, sustainability is not, you know, kind of an add-on thing here. Rethinking what can you do with these sites that that serve a function but are not necessarily vibrant, you know, and people think, okay, well that site's over, so now we're going to go sprawl somewhere else. How do you instead break up that site in a way that lets some of the, you know, the nature of the site come back, both literally and metaphorically? So, you know, thinking about those sites as part of a watershed. Where's water going on this site? They're completely, you know, that's all asphalt. So how do you start to break them up and bring some of that larger natural context back? Not restore them to a natural state, just open them up, soften them. I think that's a really important part of making them pedestrian friendly, is making them, we have an instinctual connection to nature, and letting that come back a little bit would be great.
Yeah, I think as a recent Californian, I actually get really impressed by the amount of nature that's around, whether it's mountains in the background or even like trees in the city. And I think when I first came to California, it's like, this is like a landscape architect's dream, because there's so many different types of species that you could actually work with and actually create something that's really beautiful and integrative. So it's another kind of ingredient that you can actually play with. So on that note, I think it's interesting that we're touching on the idea of a sense of place, and it needs to be more than just how we conceive it. There are other elements involved, like nature. So on that note, maybe I'll kind of come over to Mon and talk about what is your perspective on creating a sense of place, or how do you communicate that in a kind of urban context with respect to these two cities?
Yeah, excellent question. You know, I first want to say, tremendous job, great job with this the whole purpose of what we're doing here, trying to create these integrated environments is absolutely brilliant. I really commend the whole team for taking the time to do this and put some thought and energy into this, because these are challenging problems that really are pervasive. I mean, the way our society has developed and grown over time has really created these places that are an obstacle right now. I think they're really challenging. And one of my favorite quotes is a quote from Einstein that talks about the significant challenges we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. You know, we have created a kind of interesting situation that we have to find a way to reconnect and reinvigorate these environments that make them people-friendly and people-centered. And one of the key fundamental areas of this is, how do we create this notion of leadership? Leadership is fundamentally, you know, I think is kind of the enabling art. It really helps facilitate everything else. Cities and architects and designers are all about creating this ability to create a vision for communities with discipline, passion, and conscience in a way that makes it sustainable and creates a legacy. And I think fundamentally that is our ultimate goal as designers and architects and city representatives, to how to create these cities, how to create these places. One of the fundamental things that we use, I can talk a little bit about this now, or we want to move around, is just there's kind of different, you know, the ends pre-exist in the means. Okay, I believe that we have to create processes and procedures that make it able for us to get the products we want and what the ability to create places that we want. And I think if we built these processes on human needs, more of a human needs paradigm or approach, an inside-out philosophy towards human needs, we can make these work. And we've modeled this idea and kind of formulated this notion of kind of the experience pyramid, that if you take the Maslow's hierarchy of need, that same kind of idea with self-realization being the top level of the pyramid, and you kind of stagger this up, the first human need that we feel we work with is this notion of a need for certainty. How do we create a sense of safety and comfort in these environments? So the first need is